Sunt Adrian Boconeanu și îmi face plăcere să ne revedem la Punctul de plecare. Într-o emisiune realizată pe Skype, discut cu dr. Snyder, profesor la Southern Adventist University. Captivat de dorința de a înțelege cât mai bine funcționarea organismelor vii, el s-a specializat în neurofiziologie și a avut un traseu profesional deosebit de interesant, între altele, petrecând o perioadă îndelungată la o instituție educațională adventistă din Indonezia. Dar, în mod neașteptat, cel mai important proiect la care lucrează de mulți ani se desfășoară într-un important șantier cu oseminte de dinozauri. Pregătiți-vă pentru o discuție foarte interesantă. Thank you, Dr. Snyder, for accepting my invitation.
It's a pleasure to be here, Pastor Adrian.
We had some emails almost 1 year ago, back and forth, and yesterday you just said, I'm ready, I'm free this time, so I appreciate that. The name of the program, as I said, is The Starting Point. So I'd like to invite you to share with our viewers some early memories, and especially the way early encounters, events, or influences helped you to become the person you are.
Well, I grew up in Michigan, not too far away from Andrews University.
Mm-hmm.
I spent my childhood there. So I got to go into the woods and into the lake and outside. I just enjoyed being outside and learning about the creation that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I finished college, my major professor was trying to get me to go into medicine. I said, well, I don't know. I'd rather, work with biology than work with sick, grumpy people like myself when I get sick. So it's worked out that I went on, did a master's degree in animal behavior with seagull behavior, and then shifted gears. There weren't too many jobs out there in animal behavior at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Shifted gears into neurophysiology and worked on doctorate at Washington State University.
Mm-hmm.
So God led us, my wife and I, we got married right after I got out of a master's program.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Washington State University, spent 4 years out there. God led us in a miraculous way of finding a little piece of paper in the bottom of a church at Walla Walla one day. And it was from the General Conference looking for a missionary biologist overseas in Indonesia.
Oh, my.
He led the pathway. We spent 9 years in Indonesia.
Oh.
And in a similar miraculous way, brought things about and brought us here to Southern. So we've been here since, and I haven't been fired, and I haven't been led by God to go somewhere else.
Most of the teachers coming to teach at Southern get fired after a while.
I hope. Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah. So returning to your early life, it seems that you have been drawn to nature from the beginning. And, but did you attend Adventist or public schools?
I was fortunate to be able to attend Adventist schools. I attended 1 year at a public school, but most of the schooling was through my master's degree was at Andrews University.
Mm-hmm.
My doctoral work was at Washington State, so a public institution. And what's interesting is that when I finished there, I thought that I would really never want to work in the Adventist system.
Really?
Because there's more of a freedom. I felt really positive about working outside in the Adventist church.
Mm-hmm.
But God had other plans, so I have worked within the denomination ever since that point.
So do you still feel nostalgic about having more freedom? Do you feel constrained?
No, I don't find that a problem. I try to make the changes from within. If things need to be changed, I I understand the Adventist system, education, and where there's a weak spot, then I try to strengthen it. So I work from the inside to make changes that I feel need to be made.
Good.
So that's where I've taken the approach.
Do you remember becoming aware that contrary to what you used to hear at home, reading the Bible, going to church, the origins of life, I mean, as most people, educated people, we could say, today understand them, they are without any God, without any design, any plan, and any future. Do you remember that time, and what was your reaction?
I think that I was not an isolated upbringing. I had friends that were from the city. I had friends, non-Adventist friends. We sometimes talked about those types of things. My dad was a physicist, and he brought pieces in and said, well, you can look at it this way and you can look at it this way, and help guide a little bit of that thought pattern. I think that the Adventist teachers I had were very positive overall through my college, high school, college, and beginning of my master's work in showing that, here's two sides of a story. There are at least two major worldviews. And so you need to think what you're going to do and how you're going to answer those questions. It didn't really bother me too much. I didn't find a disconnect in dealing with people. I almost felt sorry for people who thought that there was the evolutionary approach, because then they didn't have anything to look forward to. There wasn't a heaven in my thinking at that time. That they wouldn't know that there is something better and that there's a power that we can utilize within us here, that God wants to have a personal relationship with us here and now, as well as the future. So I could see just by lifestyle, I was better off being a Christian, having a time frame. Here's your 7 days, especially when I was in graduate school. None of my friends, there was a couple of Christians, but all of them said, well, how can you take a whole day off of the week? I'm just swamped. I said, well, I get swamped too, but I have to get a day off. I got to refresh and recoup. And they said, oh boy, I wish I could. Well, sure, come on, let's go. We'll go to the mountains or something. It was like, oh man, I can't. I just can't do that. And so I had just as good a grades and everything worked out, but I had a peace of mind and a clarity that was a benefit by taking that one day out, honoring God.
Yeah. As you were teaching at Washington State University, did you feel, any, how to say, being looked upon in a different way because you were not subscribing to the general perception or the general interpretation among scientists?
Yes, I knew that was going to be a consideration. But again, I had had friends that were non-Adventists and wasn't too worried about it. In fact, later I was already a couple years into my program when one of the other graduate students that was just a little bit ahead of me said, do you know how you got chosen here? Because I was looking at two different schools. I was looking at Emory down in Atlanta and Washington State University. Both of them were doing neurophysiology work that I was interested in doing. Washington State was a little more established in that area. So I looked that way. The major professor there talked to one of her graduate students, who told me this later. And he said, oh yeah, she said, who are these Adventists? What are they? This kind of stuff. He said, oh, you want to get this guy. He said, I dated an Adventist once and they don't drink coffee. That was his comment. Well, I realized later that I received a 4-year a scholarship to a public university because I didn't drink coffee. Unfortunately, I didn't drink coffee because we were working for our research. We were working on little snails, little bitty guys. We had to do surgeries underneath the microscope. And my major prof could say, "Oh, Keith, come on over here, help me."
Mhm.
And I can walk over there anytime and go do the work.
Mhm.
She had to wait 3 days to stop drinking coffee before her hands were steady enough to do the work that was needed.
Very interesting.
And so God uses strange ways to lead us. Now, I did have some experience when I was at Andrews. We did have one professor who was probably the smartest man that I ever have known. I won't use his name, but he took us as graduate students and started asking questions and kept our minds turning, questioning creation, sort of taking us away from what we see as the biblical approach. So I had that in my mind, but because I read the Bible and because I had spent time figuring out where I was, something in my mind just says, it's not quite right. I'm not sure what is wrong. It's not quite right. And so I would listen and we would listen and talk and stuff. But we decided not to follow that route in our thought pattern. So we were exposed to that prior to public institutions.
Yeah. Now, you said initially your interest was in the area of neurophysiology.
Initially, my interest was in animal behavior.
Yeah.
I like to see why creatures did things and what they did. But when I graduated with my master's degree, it was just after the time that Tinbergen had done a whole bunch of work in animal behavior. He had a whole bunch of people studying that already for 10 years, and the field was full. So I decided to go into neurophys because neurophysiology helps explain why behaviors occur.
Yeah.
So that was my shift.
And for a while, that was your main field of interest.
Yes, definitely. And I was working with $500,000 worth of equipment, very high-powered electrophysiology stuff. It was just a very in-depth lab.
So what contributed to your decision to leave apparently a very promising place to work, to do research at Washington State University, and to go as a missionary where you probably wouldn't even dream about such cutting edge technology and equipment and possibilities?
Several pieces were involved. One of them was I enjoyed teaching, but I knew that I didn't want to teach myself as a high school student. So I knew I wanted to go into college level teaching. In science, we have to have a doctorate to do college level teaching.
Sure.
I was, after 4 years, pretty much burned out because we were about 14 hours a day, 6 days a week for almost 4 years for my doctoral work. And I realized as I looked around, there were 27 professors in our department of zoology, and there were probably almost half of them who did good research, but didn't know how to teach very well. There were probably half a dozen or so who did, or the other half, I should say, kind of did okay, good at teaching, but didn't do the research very well. And most of them had given up family to do whatever they were doing at the public institution. And I said, I don't want to do that. My family's going to be first. And so I was looking at other options and seeing what might fit out there. That was one aspect. Another aspect was when I was undergraduate, after my first 2 years of college, I started college a little bit young. And so I was kind of a little bit immature getting into college and spent 2 years really, really working hard in the science stuff. And I needed a break. I went as a student missionary to Manado, Indonesia.
Mhm.
Came back, worked with Pastor Dameron at the mission office, and ended up helping vet students to send out as more student missionaries. One of the people we sent out ended up going to Jakarta, Indonesia. When she came back, we had something in common, and that led us to now our marriage.
Oh.
So we had that in common,
Mhm.
as we had at least been to the country. And so when we found this little note, it was like, I wonder, we need a biologist. So I called the general conference and said, I saw this little message, and she says, oh, good, good. When can you start? I said, you don't know who you're talking to. So we kind of I said, you need to know something about me. I need to know something about this. She says, we've been waiting for 6 years to find somebody to fill this spot.
Oh my.
That little piece of paper had been stuck on this basement bulletin board for probably 6 years, I guess. It was yellow and curled, and it was so things worked out, though, that as we were praying about it, I interviewed at some other institutions in the States for jobs. One of them was, interested in having me come. They said, but we have another candidate who has more teaching experience. I said, I understand that. Give us 1 week.
Mhm.
I said, okay. And then we'll give you our response, no later than a week.
Mhm.
So I just waited. We waited and we waited. And we said, okay, 6, 7 days went by. That was good. Nothing. 8 days, no communication. It was the 9th day we called the general conference. Says, I guess we will take this job overseas. And at that point, it was the next day that the school called me back and said, okay, we need you to come. I said, but you promised me 7 days. You didn't call me. You didn't do anything or let me know. I've accepted a different job. And then it was that evening, my major professor from Andrews called me and says, Keith, I have a job for you. I said, I already have a job. No, 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 it's an overseas job. You like to overseas? I said, I have an overseas job. And so Lord timed it just perfectly for us to accept this job.
Very interesting. So it was mainly a teaching position there.
Yes, I was teaching at one of our Adventist institutions in Indonesia.
Mhm.
I was working in the biology department,
Mhm.
and my particular interest, or the interest they had in me, was to help them understand what research was.
Uh-huh.
The government at that point had instituted kind of a mix between the European and the American systems. And so they basically had 4 years, but then they had what's called a scriptsy, a mini thesis type thing on top of it. So the institution asked me to start up the training of the students of this extra little research type piece. So that was one of the main goals that I had while I was there.
It was also an interesting experience to immerse yourself in a totally different culture.
Yes, and I don't know languages. I learned. We were there. We were promised 6 months of language training. We got 6 weeks, and then we started in the classes. And so I used a lot of English initially, but that was positive for the students because they wanted to learn English anyway.
Yes.
And over time, within a couple of years or so, because Indonesian is a fairly simple language,
Yeah.
I was able to pick it up and ended up doing most of my teaching in Indonesian.
Really? Very interesting. Yeah. Probably it was there where you developed your family. You had
We had 2 children while we were in Indonesia. We
Interesting.
did. And they said, oh, yes, people have to come to Indonesia. It's in the water here. You can have children here. And so we wanted to wait until I was out of school before we had kids. So we were a little bit later in starting, but we had 2 daughters over there. It was lovely. We lived up at 4,000 feet or so, 1,300 meters, side of a volcano, and it was just a really pleasant. For Fahrenheit, it was 65 at the coldest and 85 at the warmest all the year round.
Perfect.
Right on the equator.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful weather, beautiful people, marvelous types of things. There always is a challenge wherever you go and learn new places, new things. But wherever you go, you can always learn the best and kind of ignore the problem areas.
Were you able to connect well with the church there?
But yes, very well. We were at a church institution, and so we were invited to do a lot of outreach projects, especially in the science with the biology design and the creation evolution side of thought patterns with what there was and what there wasn't, how to think about some of these pieces. Excuse me. And so we were able to go out. I did some work with one of the other professors on music. At that point, there was a tremendous shift in the rock music, all that progression. And many of my students said, oh, we don't understand the words, we just do this and this. So we were able to develop a whole program that we took around for several years to different churches to show the progression of where positive pieces and negative pieces can influence how it interacts with our biology and our physiology and our minds also.
Interesting, very, very interesting. That would be another topic. Yeah. So it was not just based on the, let's say, moral or spiritual content of the lyrics or things like that. It was based on physiological impact of that genre.
We used both. They were more familiar with lyrics and music and stuff, so we had to take what their interest levels were. But I did have some of my students try to do some research type things for music and plant interactions with the music somewhat, so they could do and see some of their own stuff.
Yeah. Good. So after that, you came to Southern. It was a similar position, or it was more research oriented? How it was?
No, at Southern, we are a teaching institution, so there was not any research in the job description. I did for the first 5 or 6 years try to work and develop some of the work I was doing. I just couldn't raise funds for the equipment, and there was just too many little pieces. So after that, I decided to work on improving the educational system. And probably about 15, 17 years ago now, I guess, I became chairman and tried to work on making it better for our students overall. But we also, about 12 years ago, started hiring professors who had an interest in research. Because of their interest in research, they started to have students work with them. We started to carve a little bit of time so they could do that instead of just teach full time. And about 4 years ago now, I was given the opportunity to have a sabbatical. A sabbatical is supposed to be 1 year out of 7. Public institutions have this. Christian institutions sometimes have this. I had never received one before, but I felt that it was important that I would need to do something for the church while I was on this 1 semester to do research. And what ended up is that because my son and I had both spent, now it's been 15 years, at the time it was about 11 years,
Mhm.
we had spent time with the Dino Dig that Southwestern Adventist University sponsors. Dr. Art Chadwick started it
Mhm.
in about the year 2000, and it was a little bit after that that I was able to join with the program, and we were out there in the month of June.
Mhm.
Um, so I was able to go out there. I didn't know anything about dinosaurs. My son said, well, we'd hire somebody in our department who was who helped start the thing. And he told us about it. My son found out about it, and he was 7. He wanted to go out and see it. So we passed by there on a trip, family trip out west. We
Mhm.
spent it 5 days, and he bugged me for 2 years to come back again when he was 9, then 2 more years when he was 11, 2 more years when he was 13, and after that, we just went every year.
I see.
And so I could count that as work for my field. And over time, I learned about what was going on, how to do things. So when I had the sabbatical, I said, they've been working for a while, but there's no major paper yet,
Mhm.
scientific paper on this dino dig. And so I said, well, I contacted Dr. Chadwick, and he said, oh, I'd love to have some help with this.
Mhm.
And so it took that full semester and about 2 more years after that of work, and we were able to get a paper produced that was peer reviewed. It's in PLOS One. It is an online journal, and it's the largest scientific online journal.
Mhm.
So we were just very, very fortunate to have something out there that covered the whole big picture of what this Dino Dig was. Do you want me to explain some about the Dino Dig itself?
Probably before of that, you know, let me share some memories I have. When I was a child, as I said, being raised in an Adventist family in public schools under communism, there was no other option, of course. And we were, all the time fed with evolutionism and materialism and, things like that. And of course, I had to be able to give the right answers, but everyone knew that we don't believe that. So sometime about, in those years, I heard for the first time about dinosaurs, and I simply dismissed that as another example of make up notions and made by evolutionists. And it took some years to finally realize that no, the interpretation of the dinosaurs is open to interpretation, but they did exist. So maybe tell us a little bit about dinosaurs in general. What do you know about them? Probably this term covers a lot of different species and subspecies, and so give us a short introduction.
Okay, let me give a little bit of background.
Mm-hmm.
As a biologist, I look at the animal kingdom out there. I look at the creatures in the ocean, the invertebrates. I look at the vertebrates. We have the fish. I look at the amphibians that move from water to earth to land. I look at the reptiles that kind of are on the land. And these are the progression that you hear in the evolutionary thought
Yes.
patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the reptiles, and then just body shape and body style, there's a hole, there's a gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the mammals on top of that. Birds are kind of off on their own. But as I look at the body shape, and I do teach human anatomy class here now, we look at the body and we see how it's put together. We look at these other types of creatures, and this whole kind of intrigued me. So what I found out as I was studying dinosaurs is that the dinosaur fits into this whole.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you note alligators and crocodiles and lizards, their legs are kind of out at the side.
Mm-hmm.
Mammals have their legs underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
The reptiles are cold-blooded, mammals are warm-blooded. What appears to be happening with the dinosaurs is they're somewhat in between, where the legs are underneath them,
Mm-hmm.
like the mammals, but they appear to be cold-blooded like the reptiles.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at a rainbow that God paints, we see a progression of colors through the whole rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that progression in the animal kingdom, which would include the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
I understand Ellen White's comments about a certain class of animals and the other types of things that were there, but she was mostly going off of what was she heard of. She wasn't a scientist, and things were just barely starting at that point.
Sure.
And I don't believe that she said anything about specific, the Lord said to me concerning dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So she was picking up information that she had, the best sources that she could come up with, and the knowledge that she had on heaven and God and all the rest of the stuff that she had been inspired with. So when we talk about this, I tell people that I don't have a problem with dinosaurs. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were in the Garden of Eden, or at least they were somewhere. And we have a bigger problem, I tell people, with lions and tigers and other carnivores.
Mm-hmm.
They are designed to kill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the teeth, the claws, the gastrointestinal tract, the mind, the eyes, everything is designed to kill.
Mm-hmm.
I have more problem with that, God designing that, than I do with God designing some dinosaurs. Some of them were, carnivores, but most of them weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people that, we need to study all of this and try to understand the big picture. I ask people, they say, tell to us still, in Southern, do you teach evolution?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, yes, we teach evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's terrible. I said, no, wait. You take it, we teach religion classes also. Oh, that's nice. We talk about evil in the religion classes. Sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, why wouldn't we talk about evolution in our science classes? We have to look at both sides of the story, as the religion classes do also.
Sure.
And because of that thought pattern, it's helped a lot of people realize, oh, okay, this makes sense. And we're trying to protect our students when they graduate, by the time they graduate, from being washed away with something, oh, I never heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
So we want them to look and grapple with these problems in a safer environment. Now back to dinosaurs. So many people say, what happened to dinosaurs in the flood? Why don't we have them now? And all this kind of stuff. Well, if they were alive, and again, everything I'm saying is just, I don't have a solid answer.
Sure.
These are just possible theories out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just present these, whether I actually hold them or don't hold them. I just want to present what's an option out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There may have been some dinosaurs that got onto the ark, because most dinosaurs, I think it's like 90% or so, are the size of a deer or smaller.
Mm-hmm.
We never hear about that. Let me ask you, what dinosaur do you know about? What's the most famous dinosaurs?
None.
Do you know of a dinosaur? A name?
No. Names.
A name of a dinosaur?
Maybe, but the huge species, or
T-Rex maybe is the one that's most common. I think there are only about 18 of them that have been found around the world, and that's all.
Really?
You don't hear anything about these other creatures that are massive that we have found thousands and thousands, because you can't sell a vegetarian grass-eating dinosaur very well. So we don't hear about them, but they're mostly vegetarian. It's like we have cattle, we have our trophic levels now. They're mostly vegetarian as the dinosaurs. So maybe there were some small dinosaurs that got on the ark, and I don't think that the large ones did. I don't think that the vicious ones did. But somewhere, somehow, in all cultures, we find two stories. We find a story of the flood, some way, and we find stories of dragons. Well, the dragons fit the dinosaur. Maybe they weren't fire-breathing and stuff, but these are the two stories. So somewhere they got this information. And it's possible. I mean, there are all kinds of stories and things of sightings and Loch Ness monsters and this. I mean, there are all kinds of pieces everywhere. But nobody's come up with a functional, here's an example of a live specimen.
Sure.
It's very, very possible. And I tell some of the kids that come over here, maybe the dinosaurs tasted good. And when Noah got out of the ark, man, the earth there was nothing growing. They had to eat something. I mean, that's a possibility. As scientists, you have to look at all the possibilities.
Yeah.
It's also possible that because of the heat that was generated with the continents moving and the volcanism that goes on and the steam that was coming up, the smoke from these volcanoes blocking the sunlight in the atmosphere from coming in, and the cooling and the ice age that occurred after the flood, that the dinosaurs, being cold-blooded, couldn't survive that time, right? It's just too cold, and they weren't able to survive that. So that's another possibility. If you look at Babylon, the Ishtar Gate, you can see 4 animals on there. One of those animals looks just like a dinosaur. Well, where did they get that information? So somewhere, somehow, I'm not adverse to them being on the ark or post-flood, but most of them I don't think were able to transition. So there are lots of possibilities. Those are just a few more that are out there. What else would you like me to talk about for dinosaurs?
Yeah. Before we return to dinosaurs, so you have been involved in these diggings in the state of Wyoming, I think, yeah, for a number of years. Probably our viewers know a little more about archaeological diggings and the process. How do you compare? Because at Southern you also have a strong program of archaeology. How do you compare the two types of diggings? What's similar, what's different? Archaeology and paleontology.
Well, wherever you go, you're going to have two opinions. If you ask the archaeologists, they will say, we are discovering history. We are trying to learn this. We're trying to understand how people lived and what they did, all this kind of stuff. If you ask the paleontologists, they say, we dig up stuff no one's ever seen before. So it's new. You're just digging up rehash of stuff. So there's this fun banter back and forth between them. The dig that we're involved with is in Wyoming. It's on a private ranch. I should give you a little bit of history about that. Back in the early 90s, a person came up, a professor, evolutionary professor, came up and was walking around. Even before that, back in the 1880s, there was a big collection, Cope and Marsh, collected for different museums on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And they even took stuff off of this particular ranch, Triceratops skeletons. And they just went through everywhere and collected whatever they could.
Mm-hmm.
So the ranchers said, yeah, we've got dinosaur bones here, when the professor asked them that. And he said, oh, can I look around? Sure. And then he looked around. And in a couple of years, he worked there, seeing what they had. And Glenn was the old rancher. He said he was in listening to the professor telling a bunch of students, well, yeah, millions of years of this and this and this and this. And the rancher said, you know, he was a good Baptist. He said, you know, you ought to tell both sides of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the professor said, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. No way. I'm not going to do this. And he stomped off, and he was mad. He said, you'll never have research done in this place.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was so heavily biased against creationists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Baptists started looking around. They contacted Kurt Weiss, which is a geologist.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, we don't have too many paleontologists in the Baptist group. These Adventists do, and they're good people. Work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought over Dr. Lee Spencer from Utah, which was Utah State paleontologist at the time, to the Dino Dig, and he and Kurt went through this for about a week, I guess, back and forth. Is this worth doing or not worth doing?
Mm-hmm.
They decided it was, but neither of them had a school they could work with at that point, so they brought in their friend Art Chadwick from Southwestern, down in Texas, Keene, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of explored for 4 or 5 years to about the year 2000. Then they started taking a few students there, and it grew and grew since that point. So we have very good relationships with the ranchers. They love what we're doing. They want us to have even families. They like the kids out there. They want everybody to understand what's going on. The dig itself is probably the richest dinosaur bed in the United States.
Give us an idea. What does it mean?
Please repeat that.
Yeah, give us an idea. What does it mean? A rich bone bed.
What is there is we're digging. Okay, the topography in the area has some hills and some valleys.
Mm-hmm.
To find the dinosaur bones, we walk around the hills and see what's eroded out.
Mm-hmm.
If something erodes out, then we can see it and we know it's there. Over the years, we have found the different sides, one side, another side over here, all the way around this bone bed area.
Mm-hmm.
It's only about 1 meter thick,
Mm-hmm.
and it is over a very large area, though. We have spent 20 some years digging and have the equivalency of about 50 hadrosaurs. The hadrosaurs are Admonosaurus annectens, is the scientific name. They are duck-billed dinosaurs, approximately 35 to 45 feet long, probably 4 to 5 tons. Big creatures with a brain about this big. So we got really big and dumb for these dinosaurs. So we've dug out approximately 50. If we now look at the edges of the bone bed and extrapolate how thick and how concentrated the bones are, we come up with a number of approximately 4,500 dinosaurs are in that bone bed right now.
Fantastic.
We still have some work to do, in other words, like 300 years of work or something.
So you also use modern methods to have a clear picture, a clear localization, connections, reports between the different pieces of bone you find, and because once you undig them, they are not going to be as they used to be forever.
Correct. So what happened is that a professor at Southwestern, a physics professor, came up and said, you know, you need to make this better. The archaeologists, the paleontologists are all using string here, here's our quadrant, here's what we do, measurements, 10 centimeters, all this kind of stuff. They said, we need to use something else. And so they looked around and they found a company that would work with them and help them to buy surveying equipment. The surveying equipment, and this is again a publication that came out about 7 or 8 years ago. The survey equipment has a little point at the tip. And we now have it set up with repeaters and things that we can use this handheld GPS, basically, and measure down to 2 millimeters.
Oh, my.
2 millimeters. So we will, as a bone is uncovered, we make sure that we have it sitting there, and we can take a measurement on this point and on this point here. We take measurements all the way around. We take then we take a photograph. Then we dig the bone up and we take it back to Southwestern. They finish cleaning it, gluing if it needs to be. We do a lot of that in the field, but some there. Final identification if possible, and then they rephotograph this. And for several thousand of the bones, they also have 360-degree photography. All this is on a website that has been stated in a paper a year and a half ago is the best website for these hadrosaurs in the world. It beat out Harvard and Yale and several other institutions. So it's been very positive. So what we do is measure. If you come, since this is a citizen scientist cooperation, we have people who don't know anything. We have little 8-year-old kids, 5-year-old kids, they help us. And we find things, and they find things, and they get to keep their name on that bone.
Really?
Yes, they do. And so it's a marvelous thing to have available. We then try to study the bones, and there's just not enough of us. We try to work on them, but we have so much that needs to be worked on. Now, what else kinds of things are you looking for the dig?
Yeah, well, our time is almost up, so let's try. I think you became mostly interested in identifying the way they died. I think there is a name for that taphonomy. Yeah,
it's called taphonomy. Correct.
Yeah. So what do you learn from that?
What we've learned is that this bone bed is similar in the paper that I sent to you. This bone bed, the way the bones are laid down, the orientation, the number of bones, which bones out of the bodies are in this place, which bones are somewhere else. All these aspects are significantly similar mathematically to the bone beds that we find up in South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Alberta, Calgary area, on up into Alaska, and similar to what we find in one bone bed over in Russia. So what our paper did was basically, it shows that it's kind of something killed these things. They had approximately 3 to 6 months of decay. Something else came along as they were decayed, collected them all, sent them over. It looks like over the edge of a incline, like a delta, but then on into deeper water. And then they were laid out there in the deep of the water. By adding on the comparisons to these other bone beds, this was a piece that I didn't think was going to get accepted. But it did get accepted because we didn't say anything. We said it's significantly similar for this, 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 and this, and that's all we said. And it flew underneath the radar of those who are avidly trying to keep any creationists from publishing. and it was published. And within about 2 years it's been now, we have over 5,000 downloads of the paper, which is, I mean, who studies this stuff? There aren't 5,000 people in the world that study this stuff, so I don't know who's doing what with it or how, but it's been an opportunity to share that there was a bigger global catastrophe than what the evolutionists are trying to claim. And so that really was the punchline of what we felt God allowed us to do by publishing this paper.
Yes.
For those who are reading it, they're going to start thinking, oh, this is similar here and here and here and here, and that's huge. And so that will help, I hope, honest thinkers to lean towards other options.
So when you try to go out of our little world, you have to be very careful, to be very tentative, and to take into account the strong prejudice against anything which doesn't fit the model. Yeah, but you still have faith that the Spirit of God works in other minds as well, and when they will see that, maybe at the right moment, when other questions are in their minds, and the Spirit will illuminate them. Did you receive, reviews, questions, reactions from others? What can you say about the reactions?
Before we actually published this, I sent the paper to a scientist who had declined a paper by Dr. Chadwick 2 years earlier, and he was a referee, and he wrote, anybody who believes in creation is an absolute idiot, and there's absolutely no reason to receive this kind of scientific garbage from them. This kind of a reply.
Oh my.
So I'm a little bit stubborn sometimes. And so I sent him one question. One question I had in the paper, because he's an expert in this area. I got this long email reply. You're stupid, blah, 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 blah. Well, I prayed about it over the weekend. We had a group of us prayed about it. And then on Monday, I replied to him, including a quote from his own book. And I said, this is all I'm asking you. He replied back with the nicest letter, because I realized that he had been attacked falsely by creationists. And so there are a lot of people out there that are in that situation, and they're people, they're experts. They know what they're doing, what they're talking about. Sometimes they just talk about evolution because that's just what has to be said. Many don't even care. That's not my area. But there are many who have been hurt, and they're fighting back against that hurt. Even later, I sent a few more emails back and forth. He says, here, take a look at this paper, and he sent me a paper to look at. So I think that's how we can really become the pleasant salt of the earth versus the block of salt hitting people.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then they accepted your paper, where the name Dr. Chadwick was among the others.
Correct.
He knew that. He couldn't miss that, obviously. And now it was accepted. That's very, very interesting.
It was very interesting. When we submitted the paper, we said, you choose the reviewers. We don't care who you choose. And no reviewer would accept it. So the paper said, we don't have anybody who said that they were qualified to review this. I don't know who they sent it to, but none of them said, no, I'm not qualified to review this. And so they asked us for suggestions, and we gave them, half a dozen suggestions of people who we thought would be at least honest. And they chose a couple of them. They reviewed it, it went through, they were happy, it worked out well. So God led in that piece also.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Do you have another project, or you continue this work? It's a huge project.
We have a paper that's almost written right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have 6 different triceratops and 1 hadrosaur skeletons, all in a long line that looks like it's on the edge of a lake.
Mm-hmm.
That's a paper that's going out. Behind me on the desk, I have another project that I'm getting into with students, little bitty teeth from what's called a troodon.
Mm-hmm.
Think of a really mean, vicious turkey sized.
Mm-hmm.
So God has allowed us, we have so much that we could write about, but we don't have the time and the energy. So we're trying to bring more people to the dig. It's open to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And bring more scientists so that they can help us with this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. May God continue to inspire you and to open doors for people like me, and also doors to scientific publications and scholars. They also need to understand and to trust our beautiful Creator. Thank you.
Bless you too, Pastor Adrian. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Mărturiile trecutului sunt pline de surprize. Nu toate au fost elucidate, desigur, și acest lucru nu trebuie să ne mire. Când știm că sunt multe realități din zilele noastre pe care le putem măsura, analiza și compara și care totuși nu sunt înțelese destul de bine. Cel mai important lucru totuși este că mărturiile trecutului sunt compatibile cu scrierile Bibliei. Cei care cred cuvântul lui Dumnezeu se bucură să descopere semnele activității lui creatoare în natură, fie în istorie sau în prezent și în propria experiență. Aștept la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Punctul de plecare.